morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alex Paul from InvestorStream, and I'll be your host today. Today, we have Melbana Energy Limited Executive Chairman Andrew Purcell, who will be providing an update on the company's ongoing drilling program for its Block 9 contract area in onshore Cuba. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance today. We had over 500 people register. Currently, we're heading well and truly north of 400 on the call, which is fantastic, and I really appreciate your engagement levels, and hopefully we'll be able to answer a few of your questions today as well. We've got Andrew on the line there. So Andrew, say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your attendance.
Thanks, Andrew. So look, before we get started on the presentation, Andrew will be available to address any questions that you may have. We'll attempt to get through as many questions as time permits. Please feel free to send in your questions via the chat platform, in the question pane in the GoToWebinar control panel, or simply email them to me at alex@investorstream.com.au. I have to point out that we've been inundated with questions already, so we'll try to get through as many questions as time permits. But again, really appreciate your engagement on that level. You can also download a copy of the presentation by navigating to the handouts pane in the control panel, and I understand the presentation's also been lodged on the ASX, so you can get it from that platform as well. Finally, a copy of the webinar will also be available on Melbana's website and associated platforms later today, but for now I'm going to throw it over to Andrew to kick things off for us. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Much appreciated. I've got a few slides that I thought might just provide a context for everybody. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think the main reason for today's call is to give you all the opportunity to ask questions and for me to answer them if I can. So without further ado, Alex, can you please take us through to the first page of the presentation, which will probably be page 3, I think. The corporate overview, for those who haven't met me before, I'm the Executive Chairman of Melbana Energy. I'm supported by a very experienced team of oil industry professionals of many decades, particularly in the exploration sector. They've been of great assistance in not only identifying the opportunity in Cuba, but in also defining the targets for our exploration program that we're currently running. The company's enjoyed a good deal of recent success, as I'm sure many of you know, on the basis of what we've discovered in Cuba. It's increased our value quite considerably, and we're in a good position financially from the support we received from probably many of you at a capital raise we did in September of last year, but also from the sale of assets we undertook last year to put us into a funded position to give us a long runway to do the best we can with the projects that we have. Next slide, please, Alex. Summary page is I'm just pointing to the projects that are most front of mind, I think, at the moment for all of you. In Cuba, we've got onshore 2 exploration wells in our Block 9 area. We started drilling the first well in September. We've had a number of exciting oil intervals we've encountered, and the first well is still proceeding, and we're into the bottom, we think we're into the bottom formation now, and it is also showing some very exciting characteristics in terms of oil and gas coming at us, despite the heavy mud weight that we have in the well. But Cuba will be the main topic of the conversation today. I'll just quickly point out that we do have some interesting projects in Australia as well. Perhaps the main one that you should be aware of is the sale of our offshore permit in Australia 488P to the American Fortune 500 firm EOG Resources last year. They are going to drill a well into that formation. They're hoping to do so late this year, but I think the border closures in WA have caused some complications with that. They're still trying, but maybe early next year. That well is one in which we have a contingent cash and royalty interest. We have nothing to pay, nothing to contribute there. We just have an exposure to the success case, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in this presentation before we complete. Otherwise, we've picked up a very interesting new offshore block just last month here in Australia, ACP 70, which gives us an opportunity to add another exciting exploration asset to our portfolio. Next slide, please, Alex. The Almeida 1 well, this is a cartoon of our interpretation of the subsurface that existed before we started drilling. We're going to soon put out an updated interpretation along with the independent resource assessment of this upper sheet. But just for a quick summary, this proposed Almeida well, these subsurface structures that we identified from the various geophysical techniques that we adopted, what happened when we started drilling Almeida, we wanted to test these 3 structures labeled here as U1, N, and Almeida. And so we designed one well with a slight deviation to go through each of them. Once we started drilling Almeida back in September, you'll recall we almost immediately were into oil shows in what is this upper sheet. We weren't expecting to find anything there, and indeed we ended up finding something quite substantial there. A 500-600 meter gross interval, I think it was in the end, with probably 40 odd meters of net pay, and with the capacity to be more. This U1 structure, then when we continued forward, N, this whole section there is subject to a bit of reinterpretation because we encountered another substantial oil column in what we're calling the N structure of some 500 meters as well, which we're doing work on at the moment. Very highly energized well, which is very encouraging for the potential for recovery of these hydrocarbons. And we then call TD on this section and believe now that we have gone through into this bottom section, which here in this pre-drill estimate was called Almeida. We are encountering strong oil shows and high pressures again in this bottom section, and we will have more information on that as drilling continues in the days ahead. Next slide, please, Alex. We will complete that Almeida 1 well, and then we are prepared to do some testing of those bottom structures. Won't be the full extent of testing that one would normally do in a perfect environment. We're going to want to keep that rig moving. So we'll do a week testing-ish on each of those formations. It should give us a very good idea of what we have there. And then we'll move the rig immediately on to drill the Zapato well. It's about 20 kilometers away from Almeida. It, unlike Almeida, didn't have any previous wells that, well, they had some oil recoveries, but the real game at the Zapato well is this very large structure, Zapato, that we've identified using gravity. There's a historic oil field called Matembo that has historically produced a very light crude oil at surface in this area, but the kitchen for that oil field has never been found, and that was what some of these previous wells, Bolaños, Guadal, and Tabo, I guess, were looking for. But what we can see from our analysis is they probably didn't drill deep enough. And that's our objective then, to drill a well straight down into the top of the Zapato structure. It's a one shot. It's a good candidate for being the source of that oil field. And that'll be our second well, probably starting in about May is my best estimate at the moment, given the testing we're going to do it once we finish Almeida. And that will probably be May, June, and then that will bring to a conclusion the 2-well drilling program as currently planned. On to the next slide, please, Alex. The Bonaparte Basin, one I'll touch on just to finish with. It is a isolated carbonate buildup. This is the one we've sold to the American company. It is a play type not been tested in Australia before, but where it has been tested abroad and where it's worked, these play types tend to work very big when they do work. So although it's a very decent best case prospective resource estimate of 400 odd million barrels of oil equivalent, the high case is 1.4 billion barrels. And I think that probably gives you an indication why a Fortune 500 US company would want to make a country entry to Australia to drill this well. It's of a scale that if it works, it's meaningful to them. It certainly will be meaningful to us, given the royalty interests that we have. So that's a very exciting add-on to have in the portfolio for later this year, early next year. Next slide, please, Alex. The recent pickup in the Ashmore-Cartier region is downtown prospectivity itself. You know, it's got discoveries on the block. It's got plenty of oil and gas fields around it. Sort of feel we can add a lot of value to with our technical expertise and see if there's something else there to be defined and chased. Next slide, please, Alex. I knocked this slide together last night for this call. I just thought it might be useful, particularly below the middle bar, which show the months and dates ahead. It just shows you the runway of activity that we have in Cuba over the rest of this year and the frequency of news events that I currently anticipate having going out to the market. You know, where we're drilling, where we're logging, where we're flow testing. If we have a successful flow test, you know, do we put something on production straight away? That decision will come soon. Then there's the Zapado wells, and then also the resource estimates of, you know, the N structure, the I structure, and then Zapado too. Hopefully, we'll have more news flow and more resource out of that well. We're all hopeful of. So there's plenty of things to look forward to in Cuba over the course of the rest of 2022, and you know, we have enjoyed delivering the news that we've been able to date, and we hope to have more news to be able to deliver to you in the near future. That's the end of the presentation I'd prepared for today, and I think we can probably now just go straight into the Q&A section, Alex.
We do have a lot of questions, Andrew, as you mentioned. So look, the first one we'll get stuck into. You mentioned the Melbana sold WA 488P, which contains a Beehive prospect, which was estimated to have a high upside return. As you mentioned, there's the potential to receive US $10 million per 25 million barrels of oil equivalent as further royalties from this sale. Is it Melbana's intent to sell its remaining 30% in Block 9 under a similar sale agreement? And if future payments from such royalties are received, do Melbana have any short to medium-term plans in the next, you know, say 1 to 2 years to return some of these royalty payments back to shareholders as dividend payments?
We don't have any immediate plans as a board to sell our contingent royalty interest in 488. We sold 100% of that permit. We no longer have a 30% interest, but we do have a contingent royalty interest. And what our objective at this point, if someone wants to buy that contingent royalty interest, you know, as a board, we'll always, you know, consider any offer that we receive. But our position here and now today is to have that well drilled, and if it is successful, then it should result in a very good future cash stream for Melbana. And look, we're a company that, you know, is in the business of delivering returns to shareholders, and particularly given that we've got a historically very large tax loss position. If we were to get a good revenue stream as a result of this royalty, then monetizing that and offsetting it with our cash, our tax losses, and providing a capital return to our shareholders would be a great way to deliver something to our shareholders in terms of value creation. So that seems a very reasonable question and way forward in the success case.
Thanks, Andrew. So approximately how long will it be after the completion of Almeida that oil can be processed and sold?
Well, it could be, you know, a successful flow test in the Almeida wells in whichever section, in the N or the I section. We could choose to put that onto immediate production, given the type of well we've designed, if the characteristics of the reservoir are supportive of that. So we could be producing and selling oil very quickly from Almeida.
So approximately how many days or weeks should it take for the Mayo options to be converted to fully paid shares?
Okay, the options expire in September. They can be exercised at any time before then. And once you give notice to the register, the forms are on our website. I believe that they're processing them once a week. You can have your shares, you know, the following week.
So, Andrew, you've provided a bit of a timeline broadly in the presentation, but could you provide an indicative timeline for the completion of the drilling of the Almeida drilling program? And in that estimated timing, could you also include the analysis of the well tests for drilling completed to date in the regions U1 and N, and also the completion of the test for the lower region of the well, being Almeida?
Okay, I'll unpack that in several stages. The drilling of Almeida, we believe we're into the final section, the final formation that we wanted to test, the main section we wanted to test. Now, there's always a tension between the geologists who want to keep drilling as far as possible while we're having oil shows, and the engineers who are trying to maintain the capabilities of the rig at the depth we're at, and then the requirements of our partners and my board who are looking at the spend. Those three things need to align and to come up with a decision on when to call TD on this well. But at this point, we're targeting getting to 4,000 meters as we originally prognosed, and we're probably at just under 3,800 meters at the moment, so there's not far to go. We'll then make that decision, call TD, and come back and flow test the eye structure first, where we are at the moment, and then back up and flow test the end structure. We haven't done any flow tests yet. We've done logs on the upper sheet and on the end structure. That's different to flowing oil from the well. So the logs give us a lot of useful information about the characteristics of the formation and other indications of hydrocarbons and porosity of the formation, and etc. But a flow test is what's now needed, and that's going to give us the last. We hope it will give us the last bit of information we need on the well. I say I hope because there's always one more test that the scientists want, but that's the next important bit for us to look forward to. I think I answered all bits of that question then, Alex. I'm not sure.
I think you touched on every aspect of it, Andrew. So we'll move on. We have so many to get through. As you mentioned in the presentation, the program moves on to the Zapata field after the completion of the current program at Almeida. Is it possible that additional drilling might be required back at Almeida in order to further examine that field? And I guess the reason for this question is that it appears the schematic sketch or the cross section in the REO presentation seems to miss the top of the end section. Or is it likely that the resource might be retrievable from the current drilled hole?
Right. Don't read too much into the simple schematics that we share online. They're greatly simplified to make it easier to understand the big picture of what's going on subsurface. Yep, absolutely. We'll go back and want to drill more wells around the Almeida structure. We are advanced in our planning to, you've heard me talk on this call about flow testing the N and I structures at the bottom of this first well, but we have that upper sheet discovery, and I don't think the best way to test that upper sheet discovery is to put another well in it and not use this current well, because that upper section, we drilled through that like a hot knife through butter. We went straight through that down to 1,500 meters almost in no time. So a really quick, easy, cheap well straight into that upper structure, designed to maximize recovery of the oil in that upper structure and appraise it, is a well we would like to do next, and we're advanced on the permitting and planning for that well. But then, the Almeida structure generally, yes, we could turn the first well on into a production well if the reservoir's characteristics support that when we do a flow test, but that's not the main game. The main game is these are massive structures, and we think there's a lot of oil there. So, let's get in there and step out and do a field development plan and really start to produce material volumes of oil. That'll be the main game.
So I guess further to that then, Andrew, is it likely that additional funds will be required from shareholders for additional drilling or resource development, or will the existing funds that you have currently be sufficient in the short term, 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, I think we're fine. We've got the funds we've got at the moment to do the 2-well drilling program. We've got the options expiring. Excuse me. We've got automatic light sensors here for energy saving that make things go dark automatically. We've got the options expiring in September, which are well in the money at the moment. They are going to deliver to us, if exercised, another $20 million, and we got another $10 million in another pocket that we got from the sale of the permit to EOG here in Australia. So we're very well resourced, and I think the objective is to get these these oil columns that we've encountered understood, appraised, turned into reserves. And once you get to that point, a whole slew of other funding options become available to you, which mean raising equity becomes the least desirable thing for us to do, especially at current interest rates. Prepayment agreements with trading firms wanting to offtake the oil, fund the field development that way. We have our partner, Sonangol, a very well-resourced company, who wants us to continue as operator forward. And we'd be looking to leverage all of those sources of capital as the most cost-effective way and least dilutive way to develop these fields.
You mentioned your partner, Sonangol. Does the contract include drilling and development costs? And is Melbana's contribution fixed at 15% for both components should the commercialisation of the well, or indeed multiple wells, proceed?
The agreement with Sonangol is they're a 70% interest now in the production sharing contract. Melbana's 30%. That's across the whole block, not just these 2 wells. But the agreement we did with them is that they would fund 85% of the cost of the first 2 wells that we're currently drilling. But thereafter, we're going to be 30%, they're going to be 70%.
So is Sonangol's interest limited to Almeida and the Zapato drills only, or does it extend to 70% ownership and 85% funding across the remainder of Block 9?
Yeah, no, they're 70% of the entire block, not just these 2 wells, and that's the participating and working interests are the same for both of us going forward. They're 70, we're 30.
Now, we've had this question come through quite a bit, especially with recent events between Russia and Ukraine. Do you expect the conflict between Russia and Ukraine to have any significant impact on contract agreements or anything, I guess, any other backlash potentially, given, first, like contract agreements with the Cuban government, given the strong political ties between Russia and Cuba? And I guess an extension of that is, do you see any potential hindrances going forward with regards to that conflict?
The production sharing agreement that we and Sonangol have with the Cuban National Oil Company is protected by Cuba's foreign investment law. It is a very high level of protection relative to a number of other countries I've operated in, and Cuba's got a very strong need for foreign investment and for more oil production. So I think we're very comfortable that the runway is unencumbered for us in developing and continuing to understand the oil we've encountered thus far.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'll ask this question in 2 parts. Firstly, can you just confirm that the San Anton field was produced from an upper sheet reservoir?
That's outside of Block 9, and there's not a lot of publicly available information on that field. But, broadly, historically, there's been examples of production from very shallow depths in Cuba, such as the Matembo oil field I just discussed a few moments ago. That produced, 5 million barrels, we think, historically. So, yeah, there's a lot we can infer, but we don't have specific information.
So could you just provide an indication of timing for the release of the upper sheet resources?
Very soon. We're just assessing it with the independent consultant now finalising some of the interpretation. I hope to have it out by the end of this week, possibly, but maybe it'll slip into early next week.
One for us to look forward to. From information released, there seems to be potentially 4 distinct reservoir zones within the upper sheet, that being the shallow section fracture reservoir, a shallow section conventional reservoir type section in M2, the Amistad U1 reservoir, and the 1800 high pressure zone reservoir. Can you just confirm if that is indeed the case?
May I ask to hold my answer to that question until we put out our updated interpretation of the subsurface based on the results we've obtained to date and the work done by our independent resource certifier, and that'll answer that question well. Give us a few days.
No worries. Look, so does Melbana have any preliminary revisions to what the recovery factors within the upper and lower sheets may be? I guess, and that'd be based on data obtained so far, so things like API, pressures, first pass porosity and permeability, etc.
No, we need to do the flow test to get a better handle on that. All of it's conjecture at this point, and the logs can only tell us so much because the mud weight is so high to control this well that it's very difficult to extract confident data on those variables in a live well.
Can you just confirm that Rafael Tenreiro, and apologies for the pronunciation, is your country manager in Cuba?
He is indeed, a very important and valuable member of our team.
So now, given the success of Almeida and what we have learned from the well to date, does this acquired knowledge improve the chances of success at Zapata?
Well, we already knew we were in a proven fairway, but Zapata is an independent structure, so geologically speaking, probably not. But what we've learned from the drilling of Almeida 1, our first well in country, that's been very valuable, and I think will be a great contributor to our forward efficiency and understanding as we drill Zapata.
Can you just please elaborate more on the production sharing agreement and how it works, especially in terms of Melbana's entitlement to oil?
Well, production sharing agreements are a common form of agreement in many resource projects in many jurisdictions around the world. The exact terms are always commercial in confidence, but typically they work in a way that a foreign investor comes in and they put up, they get given a title to an area of land for usually a considerably long time, and they put up all the money and do all the work and try and find something, and if they do, then they're entitled to first have the lion's share of the earnings from that field to repay their previous effort, the expenditure and the costs of that previous effort. And then once they've repaid themselves, then the production is shared. It's a production sharing contract. And that is probably about as much as I can share on the details of our agreement with the Cuban National Oil Company. But our share is between us and Sonangol. They're 70%, we're 30%.
So if the well is classed as commercial, do you plan to be refining oil from Block 9 this year by trucking it out?
We won't refine the oil. We will truck it out, certainly. We will produce the crude and put it into tanks that are available for that purpose up in Varadero, which is about a 40-minute drive away. And the fields around us, the San Anton field that someone questioned before, and the Mahagia field nearby, that's how they do. They just truck the oil up to Varadero from where it goes to its ultimate buyer.
So, Andrew, will oil zones in Almeida be production tested before the rig moves to Zapato, or after the drilling is finished at Zapato?
We've put time into the work schedule to test the N and I structures, if warranted in the I structure. It's still a bit early to say. It's looking promising. We will do short tests in each of those sections before we move the rig to Zapato.
So given the extent of the net and gross intervals intersected, the vuggy nature of reservoir and pressure regime in the N discovery, where is the discovery likely placed within the prospective resource figures, the P10, P50, P90 prospective resource figures, or are these figures potentially exceeded?
I'd like, again, to defer answering that question until we put out the updated resource assessment and independent certifiers view in the next few days, week, because it'll answer those questions more precisely than I can now in a quick forum such as this.
So light oil or heavy oil, which one are you more confident you've found in the N structure and also in the main Almeida target?
Again, it's really hard to tell. Yeah, when we're getting oil come out over the shakers, it's mixed with the very heavy mud we're using to drill with, and it's difficult to take that off and do an assessment on its API. It looks lighter, and especially when it flows over the shakers considerably, as happened recently, as we said in this morning's announcement, in the I structure with that influx into the wellbore. Let's wait and see. But even a little bit lighter than what is typical in Cuba is a good thing. The lighter the better, of course.
Are you still drilling ahead through the Almeida reservoir till you reach the end of your gross oil column? And is it as big or bigger than you anticipated?
We're not drilling ahead at this very moment. We're building mud weight just to try and put this well back in its box a bit. It keeps coming at us. It's a very energetic section we found ourselves in again. But once the mud weight's built up to what we need, we will continue to drill ahead. And bit early to say that it's bigger or otherwise to what we prognose, because we're still in it. And let's see what another week of drilling has to say to us, and then I'll be in a better position to answer that question.
So in your view, how soon could it be before this well can be producing cash for Melbana?
Oh, as I think I already answered, it's possible if the reservoir performs suitably and we, turn it on and just leave it producing, that's oil for our account immediately. Before it starts producing cash for us is perhaps a slightly different answer, in that, we have to determine when we want to declare commerciality on the field. Because that has implications for the exploration period of the PSC. But leaving that to one side, it's for our account immediately.
So when do you expect to spud the next well?
Best guess at the moment is early May.
A nice curly one for you, Andrew. Just how happy are you guys with the progress that you've made over the last couple of months? And I guess big picture, is Block 9 looking bigger than you anticipated?
Oh, no, naturally, we're very happy. We've had a lot of exciting intercepts of oil and movable oil, it would appear too, even given the very high mud weights that we're drilling with. And with regards to the size of the prospective prize here, well, that upper sheet unexpected intercept alone means our pre-drilling resource assessment was probably light. There's now potential in a whole sheet of Block 9 that we previously didn't allow for. So yeah, I think it is fair to say it's bigger than what we anticipated.
So if the current drilling is proven commercial, can production begin from the current well, or do you need to drill another one?
I think we've probably answered that one. We can produce from the existing well, but you'll want more wells to produce a field of the potential size of the one we're looking at.
Given the location and importance to Cuba's tourist sector, are there any considerations that affect the well differently to any other?
No, we're a fair way from the prime tourist zones. I mean, those of you who know Cuba or have been to Cuba, I mean, you've got oil wells, right near the beach in the tourist zones, and they're well disguised and they're back a bit, and they're ones that are right next to the tourist zone. We're a good 40-minute drive away into the countryside.
So, Andrew, why is the historical extraction level of the existing fields so low?
It's heavy. The oil's heavy. Typically, from where it's been produced from in Cuba is in these upper sheets, and it's shallow, it's heavy, and it is less energized. So and those factors together means the 5% recovery factor, which has been typical of Cuban production today, which is why that number is being applied to the oil in place that we have in our block.
Now, I understand you may have covered this in the presentation, but it might be worth revisiting again for those of us who aren't geos or who are still getting our head around the whole production aspect. Can you just explain in layman's terms what you're looking at and how it has differed from your expectations and estimations?
Well, in layman's terms, we always we're encouraged by entry into this block by the previous oil discoveries. So we knew we were in a fairway of interest. We knew that there was hydrocarbons there. We wanted to go and test these deeper structures after analysing the seismic data and the other data that existed, like the gravity and so forth, because our thesis was that those previous wells recovered lighter oil at depth, and we understood why, probably after doing the analysis that we did, that these if things are deeper, they're better protected from bugs that like to eat the light chains of the hydrocarbons and create these heavier oils. So our thesis seems to have certainly been right in that there is oil continuing on this strike from that northern coastline of Cuba, from Havana to Varadero, is a prolific hydrocarbon zone. It's got a lot of discoveries, it's got a lot of oil production, but there's a whole island, and we're the very next cab off the rank after that existing production zone. So we're on strike, and it's an encouraging set of results we've got from this first well, and at the depth we're getting them and the pressure that we're getting them alone, the pressure is encouraging. Even if we had the same heavy oil, which would seem unusual at this depth, but even if we had the same heavy oil, a better pressurized system would assist with a higher recovery too. So there's lots still to learn, but at this stage we're very encouraged by what we're finding out, and I hope that answers it in a layman's way satisfactory.
No, I think you've done a pretty good job there, Andrew. Now, just changing tack slightly, to get oil to the refinery, will you need to use a pipeline? And if so, how long a time frame would it take to construct this, or do you have existing infrastructure already?
There is existing infrastructure. There is an existing pipeline nearby, but it's I don't think it's probably, I think it's seen better days. And so we're not relying on that in the short term. We'll truck it out to the tanks, as I mentioned initially, as others around us do. But that's not a long-term solution. For a field this size, if it proves to be as commercial as we hope, you will want a better delivery set of infrastructure, and a pipeline it would be one such sensible solution. It's not that far. I mean, you know, compared to the pipelines I've been involved in building in Australia, this is nothing. It's just up the road. And the easy thing for pipelines is, the hard thing, I should say, for pipelines is getting the initial right of way for a pipeline agreed. You know, as you go through people's properties and parks, national parks or whatever. If you've already got a pipeline, that's all been done. So it's much easier to just go in and, you know, put some new pipe and weld it and not have to go through all those steps. But that's for the future.
So what does a development scenario currently look like based on the findings of the Almeida 1 well so far?
Yep, no, too soon. We're working up straw men, of course, forgive me, but they are too soon. We need to see these flow results, and then we're going to have you know, options A through F roll out, depending on what we find there as to what the sensible next thing to do is, as we discuss it with our partners and what they want, what they think we should do. But we're certainly working up straw men.
The finding, I think we touched on this previously, but it's, again, given the success that you've had recently, it's probably worth restating. Are the findings of Almeida 1 so far in line with expectations, or has the well exceeded expectations in your view?
Well, yeah, expectations, ambitions, they're probably the same thing when you're drilling an exploration well. You can't expect things, but you know, you can prognose and you can hope. So we're happy. We're very happy, you know, to have encountered what we've encountered. There's a number of very experienced people supporting me, both on the geology side here in Australia, on the operations, drilling teams on the ground in Cuba. This is a significant finding in a lot of their experiences in their entire careers. So a great deal of excitement for the potential of what we have. We just need to keep doing the good work we're doing and getting the data in that we have and doing the tests we still need to do to be able to properly explain what we think we have, and then, you know, explain to the market what we think we have.
So do you plan on shooting further seismic over the field and further east in Block 9?
Well, certainly that'd be what our geologists would have us do next. Yes, there's you know, the seismic that we do have. There's several different vintages of it, but it's not great quality. It's been, you know, given the results they've delivered and the accuracy with which they've, you know, told us we'd encounter what in the subsurface, you know, I think that's quite good enough for them. But no, they would like to see more seismic shot. But you know, that's one of the pathways that we may go down. You know, simpler, faster, quicker production, you know, from this upper sheet is more attractive one to me in the short term, and you know, let this field development fund itself rather than undertaking more expensive scientific studies at this point. But I'll have my say, and our partners will have their say, and our geos will have their say, and we'll come up with the best plan, given our resources and our ambition, though, to, you know, turn this into a meaningful production system as fast as possible.
So Andrew, how's the financial cost model holding up? Do you envisage raising more capital anytime soon?
No, as I said before, we've got sufficient funds to complete the drilling program in Cuba. We've got the options coming down the road in September. There's money in Australia from the sale of the permit, but there's always, you know, if an attractive offer was provided to us to just top up the coffers to a very small extent at the current price or near the current price in the market, to allow us to do other work streams in parallel that, you know, are now becoming more interesting to consider doing, given the results we have that we didn't originally budget for. That would be considered, but you know, my board and I are very committed to, you know, letting this share price have its head and letting the market's enthusiasm for our story continue. So any top up we might do would be very small if we did it.
Has there been any investigation into bringing other drill rig assets in conjunction with the field development plan that's under investigation at the moment?
Oh, discussion, certainly. You know, these things all take a while to enact, and you know, as I said, we've got options A through F that we're starting to model up in our strawman of how we do these field development stories. So, you know, all of these options are being considered. Yeah, but nothing as firm.
So has the drilling depth changed, and how deep could you go?
Drilling depth hasn't changed. Our geos have been spot on the money. You know, with what they said we would encounter where, you know, plus or minus a few hundred meters in the case of where the pressure ramp started, and you know, we're down to almost 4,000 meters now, and that's where we anticipated to be TD. How far could we go? Is, you know, we could probably go a fair way. Yet we designed a very robust well with contingencies to allow us to achieve this depth, and so we could do more. Is it sensible to do so? You know, that's probably the better question. You know, obviously you want to keep going while you're in a potential reservoir, but you know, the deeper you get, the more challenging it gets, and we've got stuff we want to test, and so there are discussions going on about this every day. But I think my best guess at this point is we'll get to the originally advertised TD or a bit thereafter, and call TD on this well in hopefully, you know, by the end of this month.
So do the findings of this well upgrade the lower sheet prospectivity of the portfolio, and will there be an overall update on prospectivity of Block 9?
Yes, there will be continuous updates of prospectivity of Block 9, the first of which on the upper sheet, as I said, I hope to have out to the market by the end of this week, or within the week. That'll be followed by similar updated assessments based on the logging and analysis done of the end structure and the I structure. So a lot of information ahead.
We've only got a couple more questions to go. I'll just preface that we keep being inundated with questions, so we might not be able to get to all of them. I think we probably have time to maybe 3 or 4 more questions. Andrew, what is the API of the oil across the shakers?
Yeah, hard to say. Again, for the reasons I gave, it's coming out of the wellbore with the mud, so it's difficult to separate and test. We've done so. And reported those results previously, and the oil was, you know, lighter than the Cuban average. But we need to get a uncontaminated sample from the flow test to get that number done properly.
Has there been any analysis done for butane and LPG content?
No compositional analysis work has been done yet either, for the same reason. The hydrocarbons are coming out all at once, all together, all jumbled. So we need to get some uncontaminated samples to do that work.
And so what's your forward drill plan moving forward?
Finish Almeida by the end of the month. Test, log the I structure, test the I structure if warranted, test the end structure, demob, drill Zapata. That's the current work plan to the end of the 2-well program as currently planned.
Fantastic. We'll probably have time for just a couple more questions. Mindful that we are sort of coming to the end of our allotted time here. You mentioned the upper sheet well is being permitted. Do you have any idea on when will you drill?
I'd like to think we were in a position to have that well drilled immediately after we finish Zapato. So planning to finish Zapato by the end of June. I think the rig will probably need a week or 2 for a bit of maintenance by then, and a week or 2 for moving it. So, you know, August, potentially we might be ready to start drilling that appraisal well into the upper sheet.
And before we leave you, Andrew, could you just provide us with a bit of a comment on your plans for the offshore interests?
The Australian offshore interests, well, you know, the main one is looking forward to that well that EOG are going to drill into Beehive. That could be a transformative discovery for Australia, and financially very remunerative for us at Melbana. And we look forward to adding to the similar such opportunities to the portfolio, either from the adjacent permit areas we have to Beehive up there, or from this new permit we've just been awarded up in the Ashmore Cardia in the middle of a very prospective zone, which we've begun work on.
And we've just had a couple of questions as well come through, where this is a sort of a bit of a theme. We've had about 4 or 5 people ask the same thing. Can you just repeat, for those who may have missed it, can you just repeat the date of when you'll begin flow testing Almeida?
I think a date is always difficult, but you know, everything going as I anticipate it to go, and almost nothing ever does go as I anticipate it to go. That's drilling exploration wells for you. But perhaps another 2 weeks of drilling Almeida, calling total depth, not my decision, on my own, but calling total depth and 2 weeks, then logging the section that we've just drilled, which is another week, that's 3 weeks, and then if warranted, certainly looks like it might be warranted, flow testing the eye structure in about 4 weeks from now. And then that'll take about a week, and then flow testing the end structure immediately after that. So, you know, 4 to 5 weeks from now, flow testing those bottom 2 primary target structures.
Fantastic. Well, that'll probably wrap it up for us today, Andrew. I think by my count, we've got through almost 50 questions, which is a fantastic effort on your part. So that's all the time we have today. I'd like to make special mention for everyone who's joined us today. I think we topped out at nearly 450 people on the call, which is fantastic. So thank you all for joining me. I'd also like to thank Andrew for presenting and taking the time to answer quite a few questions, as we mentioned. Now, a recording of the webinar will be on Melbana's website and associated platforms later today. Andrew, before I let you go, do you have any final comments that you want to leave with us?
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your support of our company. And I'm very pleased that many of you have been able to enjoy the success you deserved, given the long years some of you have been supporting our efforts.
Fantastic. Well, look, Andrew, again, really appreciate you taking the time to take us through the presentation, asking some questions. I want to make special mention as well that the level of questions that we're receiving from the shareholders, I think you'd agree, Andrew, have been fantastic. So, again, really appreciate your high level of engagement. That wraps it up for us here. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.